All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's scrap meeting. We have a pretty full agenda today. The first thing on our agenda is to review the draft wiki page for storage cards and storage cards players. So I'm going to open that up. One second. So on this page, I included an introduction with some links to the different types of players that will be on this page, as well as a link to the OLAX best practices digital media storage devices. So for this page, I tried to include the local practices and not repeat everything that's in OLAX best practices document. So I did get some feedback already. And one of the things was on how I arranged it because it was kind of repetitive since I had separated out Story Dream Machine from the Tony Box and Yodo players. I did this because Story Dream Machine wasn't in the OLEX best practices document, but I can definitely combine those and just have them separated by topic, like type of material and tag, if you're interested in doing that. Is there any other feedback on what needs to be included in this page? Feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat.
Kathy from McHenry. I thought it was well researched and informative and covered the things that, at least if I was cataloging them, I would want to know.
Is there any other feedback on it? I don't see any other feedback on it. So the next thing on the agenda was to vote to recommend this to CAM to adopt it for the wiki. But there are two people absent right now. So I was wondering if you wanted to vote on it today or felt like you should wait until everyone can vote on it. We could potentially do the vote separately as like a poll since there's two people missing. But if it was a unanimous vote, it would pass anyway. So it's up to you.
Could we do a straw poll here now? And if we have a majority of votes where their two votes would not matter in the end decision, then do it as a poll offline?
Sure. Sure, you can do that. So my suggestion, oh, here's Adrienne. One second. So let me just backtrack a bit because we have just had another member arrive. It's okay, Adrienne. I'm going to go back a bit because you were just taking a look at the storage cards players draft page. Adrian, did you have any feedback on this page? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want. Okay, great. Adrian typed in the chat that she has no additional feedback. So we're going to go ahead and vote on the motion. So this would be a motion to recommend to CAM the adoption of the storage cards and players dash page for the catalogers wiki. And I'm going to go ahead and just make some minor changes to it to rearrange it so it's not separated by player but by topic like and tag like type of material and 245. So I'm going to go through each one person's name and then you can vote on the motion. Feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourself. So Rachel. Rachel is yes. Brad.
Yes.
Katie. Katie is yes. Kim is absent. Adrian? Yes. Jamie? And Kathy?
Yes.
Okay, great. That motion passes. Going to switch screens again 1 second. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is brainstorm solutions passes concerns about multi-volume set records for graphic novels. So in this agenda, I linked to the past meeting recording from December 11th and provided a summary of the discussion. So I'm just going to review this summary again and we have some questions for you. So staff at Northbrook brought the discussion to pass. They are concerned that patrons are confused by multi-volume set records, particularly for youth materials. Patrons have found it difficult to place holds on the correct volumes in the pack. One reason for this is that the cover art for multi-volume records doesn't match the most recent volume. Some staff can also be confused when placing holds on multi-volume set records and find it easier to place holds when each volume is on a separate record. Not all attendees were in agreement on this. Some find it easier to use multi-volume records because they place holds on more than one volume at a time, or like to see how many volumes there are in the series. So one suggestion was to split up the records for the youth collection, but not the teen and adult collections. However, we are moving to the new discovery layer soon, and the behavior and experience placing holds may change. So CCS would need to do user testing and research before making any recommendations or decisions. So Deborah would like some feedback from you on these questions. So the first one is, do you hear reports from staff or patrons of problems placing holds on multi-volume set records? Feel free to unmute yourself or answer in the chat. So Adrian typed in the chat that she doesn't like the idea of having different practices for youth versus teen or adult, and it should all be the same. She hasn't had any issues at Palatine. Katie and Rachel said they agree with Adrian.
Kathy from McHenry, I also agree with Adrian. In our library, staff are trained to be able to navigate and place holds on multi-volume records, so that takes that confusion away. And spending some time playing in Power Pack yesterday, if you're in the multi-volume record, at least I wasn't able to, because every time I clicked place hold at title level, it told me I had to select a volume. So I was being directed there so even the patrons wouldn't have that same issue. So for us, it hasn't been a problem.
Tammy, you said that Grays Lake no longer has those problems. Did you specifically find a way to resolve problems like this?
Yes, and it was basically just better training, staff training.
Mhm. Okay, great.
To
So
be
the
fair, wait,
second,
just 1 second, Rachel. Sorry. To be
Mhm.
fair, Mount Prospect's had some problems with it, but we're still, adapting to some of the serial versus monograph records. And most of our
Right.
youth in the beginning were on monograph records, given the fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the standard should be that if it was not the same title, but each individual volume had its own title, they should be on monograph records. But it seems like CCS standard is more like they just put graphic novels that have volume numbers on one serial record. Is that correct? Do you know what I'm saying?
right, the practice is mostly to put the graphic novels like manga on a monographic, I mean, not a monographic record, sorry, the multi-volume set record. And most of them that have the part titles are on the monographic records. But then there's the variations where it seems like it would still be a continuation that should be on a multi-volume set record.
I am seeing more libraries using the multi-volume set, the serial record, for a graphic novel, even if they have
Mhm.
individual titles on the parts. So we're following that when we see that now.
Right.
So, so we are trying to adapt to that, but I just wondered if that's more of a agreement we should come to, that if it is, volume numbered, it should be on the serial record instead of, monograph.
I'm pretty sure
And so,
that's what's in the wiki, Katie, that if it has only a volume number, no separate volume title, then
mhm,
that's what's on the multi-volume and everything else should be monograph. I mean, historically, we made that decision to prefer the multi-volume
Right,
unless there were things like different subject headings, different tracings, different staff involved in production,
right. I'm
just to
seeing,
make it easy for patrons. So I
right, but
hope that helps.
it does, and I do see that, but I'm just saying that I'm seeing a lot more libraries now, or even with the multi-part or with the individual titles, they're going with the serial record, with the multi-part record. Are you seeing that as well, or no?
Uh, I
do
Um,
you have,
I have. I have
Mm,
definitely seen it, and I've been noticing that it's happening a lot now with books. It's the first volume, and it's just
hmm
the series title, and then all of a
hmm
sudden we don't know what the second one's going to be, and it's being put on a multi-volume, but yet we don't know. And chances are, it usually turns out that number two is a unique title, and now
Correct.
everyone's got to go through the back again. And I think it needs to be something that needs to be readdressed. That we're supposed to wait until there's both. If it's if it's volumes, seems to be called a volume, and it's not a multi-volume record. And I've been noticing that's becoming an issue, and I've been kind of debating whether or not to bring it up or not, and hoping it shakes out.
hmm
But it might need to be something that needs to be brought back to attention at CAM again.
Yeah, I agree, Brad, because I'm seeing it, and it's sort of like, well, these 5 libraries have done this now. In order to make the experience better for the patron, I guess we'll move ours to this, but it's incorrect. You know what I'm saying? So then we're trying to keep up with that, and it's, confusing.
we can definitely add it to the next CAM meeting as a reminder. And if you have some examples of records where they do have part titles and should be on separate monographic records instead of multi-volume set records, please do send them to me. You can submit a ticket so that we have some examples.
Okay, will do.
So the next question is there a way to make the volumes more visible?
well, in regards to what Northbrook had brought up about not having the most recent cover title show in the Syndetics display, maybe we should treat these like we treat true serials, and that the most recent ISBN is the one on top. I mean, fully cataloged ISBN, not every single on order ISBN, because that way then that's the one that Syndetics is looking at, correct? The first instance?
That might be difficult for acquisitions because they need it on the bottom for it to automatically take in the right ISBN when creating a purchase order. But I know with multi-volume set records, they frequently need to do a lot of manual work to actually get the right ISBN into the purchase order for it. So moving that to the top would require a cataloger adding that ISBN to the top. And I see that there's a chat message from Katie that the wiki says to add the most recent ISBN last. But that's an interesting idea. I'll definitely talk to Deborah about that, but that would require cataloging staff moving it and a change to the wiki.
I think it's well worth pursuing because we don't have acquisitions issues with serial records, the ones that we leave on serial records as opposed to using monographs, those specific instances. So, I mean, there's not a problem having the most recent book ISBN up top. We still order the right item. We're still matching to the right record. And even with multi-volume records, having the manipulation acquisition staff needs to do is in how they're loading those records, but it's still matching volume 4 ISBN to volume 4 in the bib record, even if it's not the one on the bottom. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not sure how much of an improvement that would be though, because
Yeah.
you'd still have the issue of you're displaying a cover image of one volume and there's multiple volumes on the bib. I think that's the main issue.
Right. There's always going to be a different cover if someone wants something from the middle of the series instead of the last one or the first one.
Well, isn't this our, I mean, and for other single item records, there's there's no guarantee that the item you're looking for, the cover is going to match anyways. I mean, there's no guarantee that between one version or the other, it's going to be exactly what you're looking for. So isn't it just kind of redoing everything for something that might not even work the way that you want it to? And it's also asking a lot for acquisitions and cataloging staff to remember to make sure that the most recent record is at the top, because somebody might disagree that that's actually the most recent one. I just think redoing that purely for that when there's no even guarantee it's going to be correct is a lot to ask.
That's a good point. And question 3 is, do you have any other thoughts or ideas about potential solutions for this problem?
Honestly, not without seeing how this would play out in BiblioCommons. They may have better ability to display the data we already have versus redoing everything and finding out that we've made something be worse.
I would also like to point out that in our current pack, I've noticed a lot of patrons, they'll look something up. You get the list, but they don't actually click on the item to open it up and see all the multi-volumes. And maybe that's where they're getting confused. So I mean, our job as librarians, the front line is to teach patrons how to use the pack effectively too. So if they're placing the holds through the pack, I agree we have to wait and see what BiblioCommons, how they display it. I don't recall right now, but if it's more of an open format, it could take care of the issue if that's what the issue is. Does that make sense?
Yes. It looks like everyone is in agreement that we need to see what it's like in BiblioCore if we're coming up with any ideas. And John added a comment that individual bibs have more information than the big serial records. Is there anything else on this topic before we move on? Okay, great. So the next thing on the agenda is the very controversial issue of Library of Congress's plans to stop using the subfield V form subdivisions. This will actually happen very soon on February 2nd. So I provided links to the announcement and FAQ document, and we'd like to hear your opinion on what you think the local practice should be. I added in 2 potential motions that you could choose from to vote on, or if you have any other ideas of wording these motions, we can change the wording of the motions. So one is to recommend to CAM that CCS follow the Library of Congress practice, and the other is to continue the practice of using the subfield V form subdivisions as a local practice. So I see a question from Adrian in the chat. She asks, when we send records to Backstage for updates, will the subfield V then be removed from our bib records? So we can customize the practice according to our local practices. So we right now don't have them making any changes to the subfield V. They would have to completely add in a new programming script to be able to take that out if we ask them to take it out.
Do we know how this would impact how the data works or how BiblioCore will treat our data, given that we're going to be with facets, without facets, or, sorry, the subfield Vs, because those impact the facets?
We haven't done any testing in BiblioCore yet on it, but the way the subject headings are indexed in the pack would be that when you click on a link for a heading, it would then take you to that browse list of headings where they are in alphabetical order. So it would index something without a subfield V in its form without the subfield V, and would index something with the subfield V underneath that, because it would be in alphabetical order. So there'd be separate lines for the subject heading with it and without it.
And how would we be treating things where form subdivisions would be lost that don't have genre headings? Would we be doing local genre headings in their actual document? On page 3, the last paragraph, the form subdivision, subfield V specimens and subfield V early works to 1800 are particularly useful for rare materials and unique object cataloging. Continuing down, they're continuing to discuss and develop guidance for that type of data. So it looks like there is going to be data loss that would potentially be harmful. So, I mean, if we move with Library of Congress, then we need to have like a best practice on how to address this to be best for our patrons.
Right. I agree that there's a lot of data that's going to be lost. One of the things that I am concerned about is that this would change the amount of work that cataloging staff will have to do with these records that are coming in from Library of Congress without a subfield V. So they would have the genre headings in it, but copy catalogers would potentially need to be trained to add in a subfield V. And I'm sure that's an easy thing for everyone to do, but I know that some staff have a workflow in which if there's any changes that need to be made to the subject headings, this goes to a librarian. So this may affect those libraries in which more titles would end up being sent to a librarian unless the copy catalogers are trained to add in the subfield Vs.
I'm not saying that I'm in favor of adding the subfield Vs back, just that when we're losing that data for things where it's not even represented in the genre terms, that we have a best practice on what we do with it. And I'm thinking specifically, since many of us have robust library of things collections, that's where we're going to see that take that greatest hit.
Great. Adrienne typed in the chat that she's in favor of keeping the subfield V. Let's see, and she is asking if we need to add that back into the 650s. So if we do keep the subfield V, we would need to add it back into the 650s when it's missing in the records. But I assume that what we're going to see is a lot of libraries will want to continue to use the subfield V and would probably add it into the OCLC records, but it's probably going to be a mixed bag of records that have it and records that don't have it going into the future.
Is it something where if we make a decision to do this consortially, we could consider having Backstage add that in their new bib record processing?
Yeah, I can work with Backstage to do that. So if we do that, so basically we're on a schedule that's mostly to send records to Backstage every other month. So for that period of new records coming in without sending it to Backstage, there would be records without the subfield V, potentially if no one is adding them in, if copy catalogers are not adding them in, and it could be a lag time between 1 to 2 months before they end up back in the records.
Do we know what PCC is doing?
We do not. They're still deciding on their policies.
It is hard to know kind of what you said a minute ago about we don't know how much of this we're going to actually see in WorldCat, because yeah, they might come in without the subfield V from LC, but somebody or a lot of libraries might add it back in before we bring it into Polaris. So it's hard to know how big of an issue it's actually going to be for us right now, I think.
It is. We could also wait and see in the month of February and March to see what the records look like, and see what the ramification of this is. Wait to see what PCC's policy is, and what other libraries end up doing. In the meantime, I could work with Backstage to see if there's a way to test adding it in if it's not there. But I wouldn't necessarily want to do that if we're going to plan to follow Library of Congress's policy. But it sounds like adding the subfield V in would be better.
Rachel, oh, sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
During that time while we're waiting to see what the bib records look like, can records without subfield Vs be tested in BiblioCore to see what they look like and how that would impact searching as compared to those with subfield Vs?
Yeah, we can work on testing that in BitFrame.
And, we could always like play
I mean,
in the
not
test
BitFrame.
server too.
Sorry. Yeah, in the test server and in BiblioCommons, or BiblioCore, I mean.
To address the one concern you brought up, Rachel, about having copy catalogers have to do it. I'm not sure how many copy catalogers are actually importing in from OCLC. And so maybe that could be, those libraries could make sure that whoever's doing the importing from OCLC, make sure to add the subfield V back in if it's missing before it goes to the copy cataloger.
I was just also wondering, as part of the export macro, can something be written in there that it would, add it to the 650 fields, based on the audience level or something, fiction, juvenile fiction,
Yeah, that's a
etc.
good idea. I'll ask John LaValle to see if he can look into that and test that option. To see if there's a way that if it's completely missing, if it can still be added in somehow based on the 655 fields. But that also only helps those that use the macro. There are those that import through Z3950 and don't want to use connection. Although there is a new function coming with the 8.0 upgrade that would make exporting from OCLC connection more easily or more easy and will basically be a direct connection between OCLC connection and Polaris to push it from connection to Polaris without actually uploading the file through MarcEdit. So that may make it easier for those that like using Z3950. But we have plans to test that first. There is a comment in the chat from Richard. He said, one thing to keep in mind is that we may not even see consistent practice in records distributed by Library of Congress. If he's reading their announcement right. He's strongly in favor of keeping the subfield B. Otherwise, we are making our catalog significantly less useful to patrons to accommodate BibFrame. So it sounds like we will not be voting on this today. We need to do additional research and we will come back to this at the next meeting with the results of our research. Are there any other questions or comments on this topic before we move on? Okay, great. So the next item on the agenda is a question I received recently on a new playaway product called Wazoodles. What Tom do you recommend using for it? What should be included in a catalog wiki page if we want one? So I figured we should have one since it's another playaway or another playaway object. And to me, I was a bit confused about that too because there's a lot of different content that can be on a Wazoodle. So to me, it's called a speaker sidekick. And it basically, to me, reminds me of some sort of MP3 player and can have a lot of different types of content that can be on these players. So it can include some things like a podcast, audiobook, music, vocabulary quizzes, and it's sort of a mixed bag, with each one being on a different topic.
Well, when
So here's
looking through the
basically what they look
toms, there is one just for a plain sound recording that doesn't specify whether it's cassette or CD or other type format, and that seemed to be the best fit
I was wondering because it's an object, if it would end up being part of Library of Things collections, if they would want it to be more like a 3D object, Tom, like other playaway.
I was gonna chime in. I agreed with you, Kathy. So we were the library that brought this up when we were trying to catalog these items. There were a couple of different formats. Sorry, this is Henry from Algonquin. There were a couple of different formats being used for the Wazoodles. They were uh, let me pull it up. Music, I think, and then audiobooks. So it was done both ways in the catalog, and we were looking for kind of a consistent way to do it. Since they do seem very general, uh, I was thinking just some kind of a general audio recording would work for us personally. We're not putting them in our library of things. They're kind of a separate collection along with the launch pads for us. So these are the Wazoodles. They're kind of a hockey puck looking device, no screen or anything on them. You press it and it's basically just a speaker. So if anybody hasn't had experience with them, just wanted to provide some background.
Thank you for sharing, Henry.
Do they have to all have the same tom? I mean, if one was just all music, could it be musical sound recording? And if it's not music, it could be non-musical sound recording.
I would think it could differ from the library, especially if these are going to be all local records. Then it can definitely differ. But from what I've seen from the description, is that it's not just music on one and not on another, and just an audiobook, but could have a mixture of different types of things like podcasts and songs all on the same device.
The ones I looked up on the page, they have a variety of stuff out there, podcasts, music. And it's not even like it's all like an audiobook where someone's reading. It's information on, so they're walking them through exercises and relaxation. So yeah, it's definitely a new one. The fixed field data, that's where I'm very confused as to what I would put in, but thinking of Tom pushing for a generic sound recording made sense because all it is audio.
And that's what we found too, Kathy, was a lot of the ones that we got had a large range of things. I mean, it's everything from just jokes to podcasts. It's got a song. So it was definitely a new one on us.
So there's a comment from Katie that they have adopted the methodology that Jamie mentioned. So it sounds like they would use different toms for different content. Um, can you describe your experience a bit more, Katie, with working with Wazoodles?
It's a fairly new item for us. We just started bringing them in this year. And it was kind of a challenge, as Henry was saying, looking at the item and deciding what to do with it. So we kind of just went with what is on the item itself rather than the type of item. Like, okay, so this is a sound recording. This is a non-musical sound recording. And that's what we would define it as. But, we can change that if there's a consensus that I would rather have just a general sound recording type definition for it. Yeah, is it dependent? I mean, is the concern how it shows up in the catalog? With the image or something? Is that
With the Tom, yes, because that's what pushes the
right?
little graphic images. And when they have the graphic images for audiobook on CD or on cassette, that image changes.
Right.
Whereas the sound recording is just a more general. So I'm looking specifically at the tom, not on the fixed fields that would generate it.
Mm-hmm. And what about with BiblioCore? Is this going to be impacted by that as well when we pick these toms? Is there going to be issues with the images there, or do we know anything about that yet?
With BiblioCore, they don't have an image of the type of object it is. They just have like tabs that have a word on it. And it does affect roll-ups. They do the thing where there's like a work record that could have then multiple different formats that you can access with tabs that go down horizontally. Um, so like the book and audiobook version would roll up, but with Residuals, it's not related to a book version, so it's not
Right,
going to roll up with anything else.
right. Well, like I said, we're open to changing that. It's a fairly new item for us, and if it would be better for patron searching and having it in the consistent type of material, we don't have a problem with that.
Do you think there are any Wazoodles that just have music on it? I haven't seen any.
I just sampled a handful, so I don't know if there are any out there, but that would take someone time to go through their entire web page and pull up everyone to see content, unless someone has.
If I could just say, I cataloged a lot of them. And I didn't see any that just had music on them. This is Rachel. Henry is my supervisor. And they had like there are different sections on each Wazoodle, and they are different themes, but they're all like Henry said, there's like meditations, there's music, there's everything. And so I cataloged a whole bunch of them, and I didn't see any that were just one thing. I think that's kind of the point of them, is that they're screenless and that they have a whole, you know, bunch of different things that you can listen to.
And honestly, if anything, I would think it would go the other way, there where we may see some that don't have any music on them. But like Rachel said, I've seen from what we've received, they've generally got a mix. But I would think if anything, we might get one that doesn't have any music on it, because they tend to be more based on a topic, with some kind of information on that topic. So sea creatures, planets, famous figures, something like that.
What percentage on average would you say is music compared to other audio?
Based on the ones that we've been dealing with, I'd say maybe like 10%. For the most part, the only one, like they've got different sections here. I can't remember what each one stands for, but there's one that's like a sleep, like more of a nap time kind of a thing for kids. And there'll be a song related to that, like right before it goes into something else. Uh, but for the most part, it's jokes, it's facts, things like that.
What if we went with using musical sound recording or non-musical sound recording based on the majority of content rather than trying to define a singular? That way we could go by defining the content of the item, but just use majority as opposed to trying to create one.
I mean, looking at a handful of them, even some that are specifically focused on music, it looks like they tend to, a lot of them are alternating between it's a song, it's jokes, it's a song, it's an activity or a game, and it's going to be who wants to split hairs between, is it 51% song and 49%, and is it by quantity or duration of will be the delimiter if it's more one than the other. I mean, I think that's kind of I don't know if that's something we want to wade into for trying to figure out which type of material it is.
I'm open to leaving that as cataloger's judgment. I mean, the cataloger who has it in hand should be able to determine.
What about just using the TOM for sound recording rather than specifying music or non-music, just to make
Rachel,
it easier to make the choice? Yeah.
we're hashing over the fixed fields in the record type, not because whereas that will determine the tom, the tom for cassette or CD is also pushed by the 007 values, correct?
Right. So with this example of the launch pad, the 007 is for a standalone device. Which is why I was thinking that some libraries may want to also use the standalone device option since it's some sort of preloaded speaker or MP3 player and not just a, a card or um, a disk. But it sounds like everyone would prefer to just choose either non-music sound recording or music sound recording depending on the content.
I think you raise a valid point on using Playaway Launchpad, the type, so that we're mixing an object with the content. What kind of tom though would that generate?
I'd have to look it up 1 second. So I'd have to make some examples to see what it would look like for a Wazoodle. So I'm just going to search for a Playaway Launchpad, and it has this computer image for electronic resource on some, video recording on others. So it looks like it depends on the precedence of the other fixed fields because there's like a hierarchy that it looks for, and it would probably differ depending on the other fixed fields if you use the 007 for a device. So I can experiment with some records and see what options we have and what it would look like. Are there any other suggestions for what I should include for a draft page if I'm following something like the Launchpad page?
Well, definitely the fields that would push whatever tom we're looking for. Most likely anything that we need to add, like content, media, and carrier type, or digital file characteristics if we know that, or if we have any local notes in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So for the next meeting, I'll work on a draft, basically based on like something like the Launchpad page. and see what I can find for some examples. Are there any other comments on the Wazoodles? So our next item on the agenda is the review of the wiki pages for the week. So the first one is the ISBN page, and I did have some questions that I've been meaning to put on the agenda that I received in a ticket. So we had a request for guidance on this page on the format that should be kept when deduplicating the fields. And so they wanted to specifically have guidance on all of the elements that should be included. So for example, if one of the duplicates just has the subfield A and subfield Q for hardcover, others have price. Should they condense everything into one row with all of the elements, or should they just keep whatever is the last one that's been added and so forth? Although that looks like from a serial record, so that's not the best example on this page. Or looks like my screen has stopped sharing for a second. And the other questions I had were, should we remove the section about not including the price? This does come in from vendor records, and Polaris would use the subfield C if there's no subfield Q to add the price into a poly when creating it automatically. So Adrian says the page says not to make a habit of including the price, but don't some libraries use the field to supply the price for the item record? I think that some libraries do use the field to supply the price for the item record. There are libraries that have not started to use Polaris for acquisitions yet, so they do probably get the price either from that or from acquisition staff. But if the price is not in a subfield Q, the purchase orders will have the price added from the subfield C. So there's a setting in system administration to choose which one you would want to use first. And so I would think it would be useful to have the price in the records still.
If we're giving catalogers the option, if they find or import an O2O with a subfield C price, to either retain or delete it, what if we left it catalogers' judgment whether or not they add it or include it in the first place? That way then libraries that are using this for acquisitions, it can be there. Libraries that don't, they don't need to add it.
Since it says it may be retained or deleted, if we change the wording of this, since it's somewhat unclear, do you think we need to pass a motion on this?
How substantial of a change would it be to have catalogers' judgment to enter price information in the O2O subfield Z versus do not routinely enter?
I don't think it's a substantial change. So I think it would be okay to not vote on it.
Can we just remove this line about subfield C and not have any kind of local practice on it? If you want to add it, fine. If you don't, fine.
Yeah, my question is talking about removing it and keeping it for acquisitions purposes, yet plenty of other libraries, when they overlay or just in general delete the 970s, which does the exact same thing. So why is one okay to keep and we're not making a big deal about the 970s getting deleted? And I mean, why would one matter and one not?
The 970s are only used once to create the purchase order. So we do have a script that runs to automatically delete them if they're more than 7 months old. So that does happen automatically.
But also for the 020s that have a C, who's to guarantee that, I mean, would the person knowing that that's their exact one? Because some of those prices are different between one and the other for the exact same ISBN. So, I mean, that's another question to ask is which one's right or not? Or how would you know if that's yours or not? That's your price.
The price can vary depending on the time of year and the timing of the subfield C being added from the vendor record. Let's see. We did get a comment. Can we include language that says that if you're including both subfield Q and subfield C, that you should include them in the same O2O? So the subfield, I'm a bit confused about that question. The subfield Q would be in the 970 field and not in the O2O. So the subfield C is only in the O2O.
Subfield Q would be like for, yeah, paperback or hardcover in the
Oh,
020.
that's subfield Q.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm getting 970s mixed up with O2Os. So can you include, so the question is, can we include the format, the subfield Q format, and the subfield C in the same O2O? So I think that's related to the guidelines in the first question that I had was to add guidelines if you're deduplicating it. And I could definitely add something like that to just go down to deduplicate it by adding all of those elements if you can get it from the other O2Os and just leave it in the record. Okay, so I think to summarize this discussion, the changes that we could make that makes sense to me to not to, we could either choose to completely remove this price section or just to change it to use your cataloger's judgment to add price into the subfield C instead of do not routinely enter the price information. And if you see duplicate O2Os, feel free to deduplicate it and add all of the elements, the Q and the C, into one row if they come in different rows. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Given the other line in the price section about adding prices in an O2O subfield C for like kits, leaving the price section makes a lot of sense. So there I'd be in favor of adding the price in the subfield C as cataloger's judgment.
Okay. Is there any other suggestions on changes that need to be made to this page?
The only one that I had was under reusing ISBNs, because publishers do reuse ISBNs, not just in world language materials for what they're calling different editions of a work, but I've also recently, we had a donation of almost a complete set of the genealogy silver books by the Mayflower Society, and they reuse ISBNs between the different volumes in the set, and no difference between the ISBN for one of the volumes and one of the appendixes. So having a little guidance there, and if you want to look up and bring up that record, I did some creative subfield Q qualifications on that one as a result, but that might be something worth addressing somewhere.
Can you send me some examples and the suggestions you have for updating this section?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Are there any other suggestions? Okay, I'm gonna go to the next page. This is the Illinois Children's Book Awards. So mostly this is one is just updated by CCS staff when we put the items for the awards for the new year in a new record set. But did you see anything else that needed to be updated on this page? Okay, I don't hear any comments on this one, so I am going to go to the next one. Importing preliminary data records from connection. Do you see anything that needed to be updated on this page?
I had a couple of suggestions. For the importing PDRs from connection, in point one, we're making every effort not to create duplicate PDRs. What about merging duplicates when you find multiple duplicates and you're unable to just overlay a single with your connection record?
Those would need to be manually deduplicated.
Correct. But if I'm bringing in an OCLC record and I'm finding 5 different PDRs
Oh, you
for the
mean,
same item,
so you mean like if acquisition staff are doing the importing and they see that no one's deduplicated it at other libraries, should they be the ones deduplicating it when they import it? So I
that's
think
what
that,
I'm suggesting, because we're
yeah,
at some point we're trying to keep the dupes out of the database for patron clarity. And if we're making every effort not to create duplicates, at some point someone needs to merge them when they appear, whether it's acquisition staff, whether that's passed on to a library's cataloging staff.
I can
So
definitely
my
add,
suggestion was maybe
yeah, I
having
can
something
definitely
in the
add it.
wiki.
Mhm.
Okay.
I can,
And my next, sorry, finish.
oh, I can add in a link to the instructions on how to deduplicate manually, so that they can see that if they're looking at this page. I know it does vary by library on whether they have the acquisition staff deduplicate or not, but I do try to encourage everyone regularly at the acquisitions meetings to have acquisition staff doing the deduplication, and I do regularly demonstrate how to do it.
Okay. And my next one was in connection where you talk about adding a 949 field if you're using to create items on import. What if someone is using those connection records to create a purchase order to track their on order records? Wouldn't they want to add a 970?
This is for the libraries that don't use acquisitions to create item records. So there's a couple that are still not doing that. And instead of creating the item record automatically when they release the purchase order, they can use an import profile to create the item record when they import a record.
Okay. If that's who the audience is for, then those staff, no matter where they're at, then should be able to merge duplicates if they encounter more than one
Yes,
on
they should.
one.
So some of the staff that have been using this workflow to create items have used 970s, and I've been working on transitioning them to acquisitions. But I think there's still some libraries that use 949. So it varies depending on the library, but it really just needs to match the tag that's in the import profile. So it could really be any tag, actually. So I think some have not actually been following these directions and have used the 970 instead. So I can definitely clarify the purpose of this 949 tag and add some more details to it. That's a good idea. Are there any other suggestions for this page? Okay, so the next one is importing vendor preliminary data records. Are there any suggestions for updates to this page?
I have a question because at the end of that first paragraph, we talk about PDRs not being able to be used as final records even if they contain an OCLC number and that they must be overlaid by a record acquired from OCLC. Do we state anywhere in the wiki at all that OCLC is our source of bib records unless we're doing local cataloging for unique materials?
Yes, we do. I believe that's in the bibliographic input standards page somewhere. Yeah, I think it's the statement libraries should contribute new records or upgrade records in OCLC when possible. This is a part of OCLC's member agreement and helps other libraries using OCLC for cataloging or interlibrary loan. And then there's some information in the unique local materials about choosing to use OCLC when possible.
Okay.
Are there any other suggestions for this page? Okay, so the next thing is item creation date. I'm not sure if this is a useful page. Does anyone feel we still need to retain this page?
I don't, because if we retain it, then the question is, do we need to add other libraries that join CCS, because wouldn't their item creation dates potentially be erroneous too?
Yes, true. I haven't even noticed this page before, so I hadn't given that a thought. Katie, do you feel that this would have been useful for Mount Prospect staff if you had that information on this page ever?
Honestly, no, we did not even review it. We just learned from the classes on how to find out when things were created using the history and the little I symbol. So, no.
You might check with the libraries on this page and make sure they have this information in case they want to keep it for some reason and then delete the page.
Okay, that's a good idea. I will do that.
So Jamie, what do you think about keeping Niles on the page?
I have never used this bit of information. I'm not sure what we would use it for, but I mean, I can, keep this note for myself here, but I don't think it needs to be on the wiki. Unless, and if CCS needs this information, they can keep it somewhere. But I don't know, would other libraries need to see when, information about my library's date created of items? Probably not.
It would be more relevant if we're looking at, say, bib records, in my thoughts, but not your library's items.
Right.
Right. I'll just contact the libraries and see if they have any objections to deleting it and make sure they have the information on it. Okay, the next page is the large print page. Did anyone see anything that needed to be updated or added to this page?
Potential update for the 340 field for font size.
Mhm.
If we know what the specific font size is, do we have a preference for recording that? And the example that comes to my mind, although I don't have specific titles in mind, is that I have seen items, same title, but the font size substantially different, like some of those really early large print where it's either a 16 or 18 point font size versus what's more common nowadays, more of a 14 point. Would there be some value in there in terms of having that for patron information, or potentially differentiating between bib records if you're importing for something?
The 340 is something that Backstage adds in automatically to our records. And they would only add in the words large print, not a specific font size.
No, I'm asking if the cataloger knows that guidance on what that would look like. Because I've had large print books where it does tell me the specific font size.
Right. This is a new page, if you can see my screen still, of the from the DEI and Metadata Working Group. It hasn't been officially approved yet, but they just worked on the MARC fields for enhancing accessibility in library catalogs, and one of them is they have large print and larger print as resources. So they do have an option on here for adding in the subfield and for the font size. So I feel that that would, if you did want to do that, you would need a separate subfield N for the font and still have large print in it.
So would that be then two subfield ends in the same 340 or two 340s?
That's a good question. Let me take a look and see how it's repeatable. The subfield N is repeatable within the 340, so you'd be able to do two subfield Ns in the same 340 field.
Thank you.
Is that something that we
When
should?
Would it be sufficient to link to the DEI toolkit or the accessibility toolkit? The link you were at.
I think we'd have to approve of that first because it's not completely our local practice. Unless
I'm
we'd consider
suggesting
it
it
all
as an
national
optional,
practice.
not a
Yeah.
mandatory.
Okay. Well, it hasn't been completely approved by the DEI committee yet, or the DEI and metadata committee yet. So would you want to wait till that gets approved? Because it still may get some recommendations for updates, and the person that's the chair is on leave until August, so it's going to be a while.
What if we left it as optional because we can put that in the records now even without their recommendation, correct?
Yeah. We can definitely leave it as cataloger's practice to, or cataloger's judgment, I mean, to decide on if the large print should be added to it. That could also help distinguish between the font size of larger print and large print. Although I think larger print is supposed to be using a separate record from large print. Oh, no, it says large print and larger
Correct, and
print
the only
are considered large print. So yeah, that would be like a separate record if the font size changes the page size or the amount of pages.
okay.
So I'll add in additional examples of the subfield N. Are there any other suggestions? Okay, the last page on the list is for the Lexile numbers. Are there any suggestions on updating this page?
Replace the references to Marchive with Backstage.
Oh, yeah, I will work on that.
The other one that I
And
had, well, yeah, wasn't there a change where we went from not having the L after the number to having the L on the number?
I couldn't hear you very well. Could you
Oh,
speak a bit
sorry.
louder, bud?
Wasn't there a point where we changed from having it to having the L in the after the 880L, for example? Isn't that how most of them show up now in our database?
Yes, they will be like these examples in the database.
Because I think most of them coming in now do have the L. Or like,
Oh,
yeah.
I'll have
At
to
least,
look
I mean,
into that. That
the
may
ones
be
that
a
don't have the L
backstage
tend to be
issue.
older.
Okay, that may be a backstage issue. I'll look into that.
I think
I mean,
somewhere
that was
on
also
the
the
page it
yeah.
refers to that Polaris is okay with having the L, and Symphony was not okay with having the L. I don't remember where it was on this page. So actually, down under correcting OCLC copy,
Oh, let's
the
see.
second paragraph.
This one does have the L in this example, the second example.
Yeah, but in that second paragraph there, it says previously a space was required and the L needed to be removed. However, Polaris indexes properly without making these changes. So if it's okay to leave the L, then you might adjust that table above so that it
Yeah,
doesn't indicate you have to remove the L.
yeah, I will work on that. Is there anything else on this page?
I had one where reading through it, the wording could be a little clearer. It's in the last paragraph before format. And the second sentence, however, since Lexiles may also be found in some WorldCat records, catalogers need to be aware of how Lexile data must be formatted in order to for local catalog. The in
I'll
order
make that
to
correction.
for is the part that's reading a little unclear to me.
Yeah, I will correct that.
And I did have a question. When we move to BiblioCore, is any of this going to be impacted in terms of how the data is entered versus how they search and display data to the patrons?
I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. Are there any other questions or suggestions about this page? Okay, so the last thing on the agenda, I received a question about guidance related to removing duplicate tags like 035s and 037s. Do you feel that there's a place that we could add this to the wiki? I know what guidance I would add given the different prefixes and variations of what can be in the 035s. And I don't get a question very often about it. So I was wondering if you felt this is something that needs to be on a wiki page and where it could be, if it should be a separate page in a specific category.
Is the question that they're not sure if they should be removing duplicates?
Um, since there's a lot of different variations in like the prefixes of numbers, because some of them are like older numbers that have CRZ before it, but it's really an OCLC number. And there's the different variations in how OCLC numbers appear, like with the OCOLC before it, or just OCN or OCM. And then there's the numbers that are just really the bib control numbers that automatically get added when they're deduplicated. So they were just asking me for guidance on which ones should be removed and which ones shouldn't. So I usually just tell them to keep just one set of all of those numbers. Although we don't need the Series Z ones anymore, but those aren't harming anything, leaving them in the records. So they did suggest putting it somewhere on the wiki page, but I don't usually have questions regarding that, so I wasn't sure where it would actually fit. Does anyone think it is important enough to warrant a separate page for it, or even to be on a local practices, excuse me, a local practices page?
I think it wouldn't hurt to have it on the local practices page. Just, you know, what you said before about which items can be deleted, and just for clarification.
Okay, I do see a comment from Tammy in the chat that she agrees. So I think adding a line of like which ones to keep in the 035 and 037s could be added to here. So there's some additional guidance. Okay. So that is it for our agenda. Is there anything else that anyone would like to talk about today?
Hey, Rachel, it's Tammy again.
Mhm.
I was hoping for some additional guidance on the Library of Things homepage, where it talks about how libraries can create a local record for their items by identifying their library as part of the title. And in the paragraph above that, where it says libraries may attach their item records to an existing bib record with items owned by other libraries. There was a situation this past month where a library was using a record, and they might have even been the one to create it, but there were already other libraries on that record, and then they decided that they wanted to make it for their own use by adding their library as part of the title. And it put the burden, well, they were kind enough to say they were willing to make copies of it for other libraries to move their stuff to. But I felt like it caused some confusion because I didn't know, it wasn't clear from this whether they should have just made a copy of that record to use for themselves and move their own stuff, which would have been easier. Because I went ahead with it, but then I was like, were there other libraries on that? And now are there multiple records in Polaris for the same thing? So I just wanted a little more clarification if I haven't been too confusing in what I just said.
So it sounds like you're suggesting that we add guidelines for cases when a library wants to split off their local record after they've already created it.
Yeah, and after there's already multiple libraries on it, so.
Do you feel that the information that you would want on this page would really just be like the library that wants to do this to split off their own local records should create a copy for the other library and then let them know and follow the communication etiquette guidelines for informing the library?
Well, I think it should be more of, if there's already a record for a library of things item where there's multiple record libraries on it, if one of the libraries decides they want to move, well, they want a record with their title in it, it should just, the guidance should be that they should create another record and move their stuff. That way they won't even have to notify other libraries that they were making their own record and moving their things. It would be,
Tammy,
yes,
I got a question for you. So
Yes.
the record you're referring to, the library in question didn't precede it with their library names like we have for our Roku's McHenry Roku Ultra. So they've
No.
not done anything like that. They've just called it, say, Roku Ultra.
Right, it was originally just it wasn't their record in the sense that they didn't have their name in the title field at all. So then they decided they wanted to change in the way they're doing their library of things items and start putting their name in front of it and the title. And then they kind of like expected everybody else to move off of that record. So it wasn't a big thing. It was just one item, one thing to do. But if they're wind up deciding to do that with all theirs and there's other libraries on their records, it's going to cause a lot of work for all of us. So that's why then everybody was like, well, there is this. And I'm like, well, this just talks about the original creation of it. It doesn't talk about what if you're already on a record where other libraries are on. And now you've decided you want to create your own record. You shouldn't be able to just do it to the one existing record. You should have to go and create a new record, even, just create a copy of it and then make it yours.
Isn't that already created, already covered by the last paragraph? It says libraries may create a local record for their items, not modify an existing one. You'd have to create one.
Right. So that was my, yeah.
I can add something in, I think, to just clarify that if they do it after the fact, that they should create a copy for of their record and then move their item rather than moving everyone else's items. That does make sense.
Yeah, that would be helpful for showing responsibility for who does what. I'd appreciate that, Rachel. Thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions or suggestions for this issue? Are there any other topics that anyone would like to discuss before we adjourn our meeting? Okay, great. So I will make changes to the wiki and work on getting the research done that we need to do for the next meeting. And I will email you information when the pages are updated. So thanks for coming to the meeting today. We can go ahead and adjourn the meeting.